After nearly a decade of being erased from the family map, I purchased an entire vacation villa right by the sea. When my mother called with her usual speech of rejection, I told her, "I'm sorry, Mom, but just like in your house, in mine there are no rooms left. My name is Elena Vargas. I am an architect, an independent interior designer, and above all, a widowed mother of two incredible children, Diego, 10 years old, and Sofia, 8. My younger sister, Valeria Castillo, is 35, married to a high-level executive named Mateo, and they have 3 children. My mother, Carmen, 62 years old, has always had a sickly weakness for her. For my mother, Valeria was the sun that lit up the family, and I was barely the shadow. For the last 9 years, our family has had the tradition of spending the entire month of August at my mother's summer house on the Costa Blanca. It is an immense chalet with 5 bedrooms, enormous terraces, and beautiful views of the Mediterranean. Plenty of space for a normal family reunion, right? Well, no. Every month of May, like clockwork, my mother would call me to deliver the same rehearsed speech. "Elena, darling, I'm so sorry, but this year there simply isn't room for you in the beach house. Valeria's family has grown so much, they have so many suitcases, and you know the children need their space to play. Maybe next summer we can work something out." Meanwhile, Valeria received treatment fit for royalty. Mom would spend entire weeks filling the pantry with her whims, buying new beach toys, and preparing the rooms as if it were a 5-star hotel. They acted as if they were the absolute owners of the place, spreading their things everywhere and ignoring that the rest of the world existed. Do you know what was the worst part of all? Seeing the faces of my children every July. Diego and Sofia would ask me with that innocence, "That breaks your soul? Why can't we go make sandcastles with Grandma and our cousins?" What was I supposed to tell them? That their grandmother didn't consider us important enough. But the exclusion wasn't limited only to the lack of space in summer. 3 years ago, Valeria and Mateo bought a chalet on the outskirts of Madrid. Valeria had the audacity to call me and demand that I design the full renovation of the house and direct the entire construction for free, because we were family. She argued in her usual condescending tone. When I refused, explaining that I worked for myself, that I had bills to pay and 2 mouths to feed alone, she declared war on me. She started telling everyone that my work was a waste of time, that I only did odd jobs on the computer, and that my refusal was pure envy of her success. Mom, of course, bought her version of the story. Since I worked from home, sometimes until 3 in the morning drawing plans, Mom assumed I was practically unemployed. "Elena is still trying to find herself," she would say to the aunts at Christmas dinners, sighing dramatically. The turning point, the last straw, happened last summer during my mother's birthday dinner. I had just signed the most important contract of my life, the complete interior design for a new chain of luxury boutique hotels. It was a massive project that would ensure financial stability for a long time. I was so excited that I made the mistake of sharing the news at the table. "That's nice, dear," Mom said in an absent tone, without looking up from her glass of wine. Valeria, on the other hand, let out a dry laugh. She looked me up and down, and with a voice loud enough for all the guests to hear, she fired off, "Oh, Elena, how nice that you keep playing businesswoman. But let's see if you manage to get a real job with a steady salary. Then you could pay for your own vacations and stop making us feel sorry for you. The rest of us shouldn't have to sacrifice our family time because you don't know how to organize your life." The dining room fell into a deathly silence. I looked at my mother, hoping, longing that for once in her life she would defend me, but she simply nodded and stroked my sister's hand. "Valeria is right, darling. Mateo works very hard at his office, and those children deserve to rest. When you have a more stable career, we'll find a little spot for you." I swallowed hard. I felt the blood burning in my veins, but I kept my face impassive. I smiled softly and nodded exactly as I had done for the last 9 years. "I understand perfectly. Mom, I hope you enjoy the beach very much," I replied in a calm voice. But inside, something had slammed shut. I was done, completely done with being the punching bag of this family. And in that precise moment, while I watched them toasting and laughing, I decided that my response would not be words, but actions. Before continuing with the second part of this story and telling you how I plan my move in the shadows, I would love to know a little more about you. From which city in the world are you listening to me today? Leave it in the comments, I read them all. That same night, after the humiliating birthday dinner, I returned home with absolute mental clarity. The contract for the boutique hotel chain was only the first domino. My name began to circulate quickly in the most exclusive design circles. Suddenly I had more high-profile clients than I could handle alone. I raised my fees, became much more selective with projects, and by November I had founded my own architecture and interior design studio. I hired 3 junior architects, a project manager, and rented a beautiful office in the center. The income began to multiply in a way I could never have imagined, even in my best dreams, but I made a strategic and vital decision. Not to tell my family absolutely anything. To my mother and to Valeria, I was still the same Elena, who barely made ends meet. I kept driving my old car with a couple of dents in the door. I kept wearing the same simple clothes as always, and living in the same modest apartment. Since they never showed genuine interest in my life, maintaining the facade was surprisingly easy. In their eyes, I was still the poor widow who did odd jobs on the computer. February arrived, the exact time when my mother usually started preparing the ground for her famous summer exclusion speech. It was then, while reviewing some properties for a client, that I found the villa. It was an old ruined tourist complex, located in a spectacular private cove on the coast of Andalusia. It had 12 independent villas, a main building of natural stone, and direct access to an almost virgin white sand beach. The previous owners had driven it to absolute bankruptcy, and the bank was selling it for a ridiculous fraction of its real value. I made an offer that same afternoon, and bought it in cash. During the next 4 months, I poured my body and soul into that place. As an architect, I didn't need to hire an external studio. I myself drew every plan, chose every material, and directed the work down to the millimeter. I invested a large part of my savings in a complete renovation that took your breath away. I designed interiors with a minimalist Mediterranean style, built an infinity pool that seemed to merge directly with the sea horizon, and created an immense children's play area specially designed for Diego and Sofia. When the work was finished in May, the place was unrecognizable. I renamed it the Oasis Resort. It was a 5-star boutique complex with a high cuisine restaurant and a subtle but impeccable level of luxury. And the most important thing of all, it was mine. Completely mine. We did a quiet opening in June with some exclusive clients to polish details, and it was a resounding success. At the end of that same month, my phone rang. It was my mother. Right on schedule for her annual call. Elena, darling, I'm so sorry. I didn't let her finish the sentence. I know, Mom. There's no room. I replied with a serenity that instantly unsettled her. Don't worry at all. Diego, Sofia, and I already have other plans for this summer. Oh. How nice, dear. Where are you going? She asked in that tone that mixed relief and condescending curiosity. To a place I found somewhere. Nothing special, I answered, smiling while looking at the plans of my empire on the desk. The first week of July, I took my children to the Oasis. I assigned them the main villa, an enormous suite with panoramic views of the Mediterranean and private beach access. And when Diego and Sofia walked through the door and understood that we would spend the entire summer there, their faces lit up in a way I will never forget. Mom, can we really stay here? Sofia asked, caressing the linen sheets. At last my children had the spectacular vacation that their cousins had always taken for granted. But the real masterstroke came at the beginning of August. I started making phone calls. First I called Uncle Ricardo and Aunt Elena. They had always been affectionate with my children, the only ones who sent us gifts at Christmas without distinctions. Uncle Ricardo, I said. I want to invite you to spend the Assumption Bridge at a resort. Everything paid for, accommodation, meals, activities, everything. I've had an exceptional year at the studio and I want to share it with the people who truly matter to me. Then I called my friend Lucia, who was about to get married, and her parents. I called my second cousins, who had always had financial problems but were the noblest people I knew. I called every member of our extended family, who had ever made us feel included, who had ever asked how I was with genuine interest. I rented the entire resort just for us during the long August bridge. I hired a private chef to design exclusive menus. I organized wine tastings on the terraces for the adults and hired water sports instructors for the children. We were a total of 24 people from the family ready to enjoy absolute luxury vacations. Of course, I did not invite my mother, and of course I did not invite Valeria, or her perfect husband, Mateo. The trap was set, and the shockwave of what was about to happen was going to shake the foundations of our family forever. The August bridge passed like a dream. My entire extended family, 24 people in total, arrived at the Oasis Resort, and were left absolutely speechless. They walked through the impeccable gardens, dined on high cuisine dishes prepared by our executive chef, and toasted under the stars. My children, Diego and Sofia, ran happily on the sand with their second cousins, without feeling less than anyone, without having to settle for the scraps of affection from their own grandmother. On Saturday night, after a spectacular dinner on the main terrace, Uncle Ricardo pulled me aside. He had a glass of wine in his hand, and looked at me with a mixture of amazement and deep respect. Elena, this is incredible, he told me, lowering his voice. You've organized something truly magical. Your mother must be bursting with pride. Why couldn't they come? I looked him in the eyes, maintained absolute calm, and replied, Mom doesn't know anything about this, Ricardo. And they are not here because I didn't invite them. My uncle frowned, clearly confused. What do you mean you didn't invite them? Elena. She is your mother. And Valeria is your sister. This is a family reunion. I sighed, letting the sea breeze caress my face before releasing the truth I had been keeping for almost a decade. Ricardo, for the last 9 years, Mom has told me every summer that there wasn't enough space in her beach chalet for me and my children. She has systematically excluded us because Valeria's family needed a lot of space and was more important. So this year I decided to organize my own family reunion in my own resort, and unfortunately, it turns out that in my resort there also isn't enough space for them. The silence from my uncle was deafening. He didn't need more explanations. The truth spread like wildfire among the guests that same night. Everyone in the family knew the contempt with which Valeria treated me. Everyone had heard my mother's cheap excuses over the years. And upon realizing what I had built alone in complete silence, the respect toward me multiplied 1,000 times. On Monday morning, while my guests were checking out to return to their homes, my phone started vibrating on the reception counter. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times before answering in a neutral voice. Tell me. Mom. Elena. Where on earth are you? She shouted on the other end of the line with a high, hysterical voice. Ricardo just called me to tell me a ridiculous story. He says you invited everyone to a luxury resort that is supposedly yours. Tell me right now that it's a lie. It's true, Mom. There was a deathly silence on the other side. I could hear her ragged breathing. What? How can it be true? You don't have that kind of money. You do little jobs from home. Apparently, Mom. I have a lot more money than you and Valeria have always assumed. Her tone changed drastically. It went from arrogance to victimized reproach in a second. Elena, I'm very confused. If you could afford something like this, why didn't you tell us? Why did you invite half the family and leave us out? I savored every millisecond before pronouncing my response. Because you told me there was no space in your beach house. Well, I inform you that in my 5-star resort there is also no room. But that is completely different. The beach house is small for so many people. My mother stammered. But Elena, we are family. How curious that you remember that just now, I replied coldly and hung up. 5 minutes later, Valeria called. She was beside herself. You are so resentful, Elena. Mom is crying inconsolably. How can you do this to us? You're breaking the family over a stupid tantrum. I haven't broken anything, Valeria. I have simply stopped participating in my own mistreatment. You told me to find a real job to pay for my own vacations. Well, that's what I did. I bought my own paradise. Enjoy the beach. And I temporarily blocked her number. But my mother was not going to give up so easily. The next day, Tuesday afternoon, the unthinkable happened. I was in the management office reviewing some plans when my internal phone rang. It was Antonio, our head of security at the main entrance. Mrs. Elena, sorry to bother you. We have an incident at the main barrier. There is a lady in a white SUV demanding to enter immediately. She is very upset and claims to be your mother. I opened the security camera monitor on my computer. And there she was, my mother. Dressed in designer clothes from head to toe. Banging on the window of the security booth and yelling at my employees. She had driven more than 3 hours from her chalet, just to check with her own eyes if the story of my resort was true, or worse, to try to sneak in and put on a victimhood spectacle. I felt, for the first time in my life, that power was on my side. Antonio, I said over the intercom in a firm and professional voice. Is that lady's name on the VIP guest list, or does she have any active reservation in our system? No, ma'am, I've already checked. Then politely explain to her that this is a private and exclusive premises. Tell her that if she doesn't have a reservation, she must turn her car around and leave immediately. And if she refuses to move the vehicle, call the authorities. Through the monitor I saw Antonio leave the booth and deliver my message. I saw my mother's face fall apart, losing all color. She looked toward the imposing facade of the main building, knowing perfectly well that I was watching her from above. Defeated, humiliated in front of the security staff and other clients who were waiting to enter, she had to put the car in reverse, turn around clumsily, and disappear down the coastal road. That day I learned an invaluable lesson. There is no more destructive and elegant revenge than a door closed with your own rules. The weeks after the incident at the resort entrance were surprisingly peaceful. My architecture business continued to expand, and the oasis was fully booked until the end of the year. When December arrived, my mother made one last desperate attempt to keep up appearances. She called to invite me to the traditional Christmas Eve dinner at her chalet. Elena, I hope you come. We've argued enough, but at Christmas the family has to be together, she said in that martyr tone she also mastered so well. Will there be space for everyone at the table, Mom? I asked without a drop of sarcasm, only with coldness. Your dining table seats 8 people. Valeria's family is 5. You and Dad are 2. That makes 7. Where are Diego, Sophia, and I supposed to sit? Well, we'll squeeze in. We always do. We'll put some folding chairs toward the hallway, she murmured. Of course, I replied. Valeria and her husband in the head chairs and my children eating on folding chairs in a corner. I appreciate it, Mom, but for the first time in my life I'm being realistic about the place I occupy in this family. We'll pass. Instead, I organized a spectacular Christmas Eve dinner in the main hall of the Oasis. I invited Uncle Ricardo, Aunt Elena, and all the cousins who had always treated us with kindness. We were 25 people toasting with French champagne. It was the first Christmas in almost a decade where I didn't have to listen to passive-aggressive comments about my bank account, nor see my children receive cheap gifts, while their cousins opened the latest generation consoles. The real test of fire came in May of the following year with the wedding of my niece Lucia. Lucia called me personally. Aunt Elena, I know things are very tense with Grandma and with Aunt Valeria, but I beg you to come. You are my favorite aunt, and what you did for us in August was unforgettable. I want you there. Lucia was a wonderful girl who didn't deserve for family dramas to ruin her big day. I'll be there, my love, I promised. But I'm going to bring my own security. I hired 2 professional private escorts, 2 impeccably dressed men in dark suits, discreet but intimidating. I didn't do it out of physical fear, I did it as an insurance policy against drama. I knew Valeria, and I knew that a couple of glasses of wine would be enough for her to try to make a scene. We arrived at the estate where the wedding was being held and heads turned immediately. I was wearing an exclusive emerald green designer dress. Sophia looked like a fairy tale princess, and Diego wore a custom-tailored suit that fit him perfectly. Behind us, a couple of meters away, walked my 2 private escorts. My mother saw us during the cocktail hour. She took a step toward me, but upon noticing the look from one of the escorts, she stopped short. She only nodded from a distance with a mixture of regret and cowardice. However, Valeria didn't have the same filter. Past midnight, during the dance, and with a clear excess of alcohol in her blood, she staggered toward the table where I was sitting. Such security, and so much luxury, huh? She slurred, leaning heavily on my chair. Do you really think you're superior to us, Elena? You're tearing this family in 2 with your arrogance. I looked her up and down without altering my relaxed posture. I'm not tearing anything apart, Valeria. I'm just existing in a space where your insults no longer have validity. She let out a bitter laugh and leaned toward me with bloodshot eyes. You're so ungrateful. You know what? Deep down you should thank Mom and me. We were hard on you, yes, but it was for your own good. If we hadn't closed the doors on you, if we hadn't pressured you to stop being a failure, you would never have had the rage to build that resort of yours. Our rejection is what made you rich. You should kiss the ground we walk on. I stared at her for a long second. The absolute nerve, the audacity to try to claim my success was fascinating. I stood up slowly, matching her height but surpassing her infinitely in class. Don't be mistaken. Valeria. I whispered with an icy voice that cut the air between us. You weren't a stimulus, you were an anchor. You tried to bury me alive, because it made you feel powerful to see someone suffering below you. You closed the doors because you wanted to see me beg. The only problem with your perfect plan is that you didn't know I was a seed. And now, look at me, while you remain trapped begging for Mom's approval in a life full of appearances. I am the owner of the entire garden. Valeria stood paralyzed with her mouth open, unable to articulate a single word. Just then, Marcos, my head of security, took a step forward and gently positioned himself between the 2 of us. Is there any problem here, Mrs. Elena? Marcos asked in a sweet and professional voice. None, Marcos. I smiled without taking my eyes off my sister. The lady is already leaving. She has realized that here too there is no space for her. Valeria turned around humiliated and disappeared into the crowd while I returned to my glass of champagne. Elegance will always be the best slap. The echo of that wedding night resonated for months in the foundations of our family. The news of how I had confronted Valeria and my impeccable security team spread by word of mouth. No one dared any more to look down on me, much less to question my success. By October, my professional life had reached an unstoppable cruising speed. My architecture studio was signing international contracts, and the Oasis Resort had a waiting list of a full year. It was then that my investor partner, Roberto, presented me with an irresistible opportunity. It was an old bankrupt mountain refuge located on one of the most exclusive slopes of Sierra Nevada, needing a complete renovation and a bold architectural vision. We closed the deal in less than a week. I named it White Peaks and began designing a winter boutique hotel with thermal spa, wooden cabins with panoramic glass walls, and private ski slopes. While I was building my second empire, the perfect facade of Valeria's life began to crack. Uncle Ricardo told me over lunch that Matteo, my sister's husband, had been demoted in his company. They were maintaining their immense chalet in Madrid on credit and financial suffocation, asphyxiated by the sickly need to maintain a lifestyle they no longer possessed. The prison of appearances they themselves had created was devouring them from within. Late November arrived. As if it were a time loop, my phone rang again with my mother's name on the screen. This time her tone was not one of condescending exclusion, but of an artificial sweetness that turned my stomach. Elena, darling. I've been thinking, she began, dragging her words. What do you think if this year we break the tradition and celebrate Christmas at the Oasis? I could invite my country club friends and a couple of distant cousins. I would love to show everyone the wonderful resort that my daughter has built. I closed my eyes for a second, amazed by her infinite capacity to rewrite history. Now that I was an undeniable success, suddenly she wanted to use me as her personal showcase. She wanted to hang the medal of my triumph in front of her high society friends. The resort is 100% booked for all the holidays, Mom? I replied in a professional tone. I don't have a single villa free. But Elena, surely you can cancel some reservation or move some client. I'm your mother, for God's sake. You should have some deference for your family. I'm not going to disappoint clients who pay for my work to accommodate people who spent 9 years making it clear that I was not their priority, I sentenced, with ice sharpening every syllable. I'm trying to fix things, Elena. I'm trying to build a bridge, she exclaimed, raising her voice with frustration. No, Mom. You're trying to make things convenient for you. There's a big difference, I replied. Do you want to fix things for real? Very well, I'll tell you exactly what I need. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. What do you want? She asked defensively. I want you to admit out loud and in front of everyone that you were unfair. I want you to acknowledge that there was always plenty of space in the beach house. But you chose to give it all to Valeria. And most importantly of all, Mom, I want you to sit in front of Diego and Sophia, look them in the eyes, and apologize for making them feel they weren't good enough for their own grandmother. I heard her breathing become agitated. Pride is a poison hard to swallow. I never wanted the children to feel bad. I was only trying to keep the peace and do what I thought was best for the family at that moment. The intention doesn't erase the impact, Mom, I said, feeling a mixture of pity and definitive liberation. The damage is done. I won't accept anything less. You're going to throw away our relationship over a tantrum from the past, she accused in one last attempt at manipulation. I'm not throwing anything away, Mom. I'm simply stopping teaching my children that being family means having to accept less than what one deserves. And without adding another word, I ended the call. I stood looking out the large window of my office. In the distance, the sun reflected on the calm waters of the Mediterranean. My breathing was calm and serene. I had built my own castle and no one, absolutely no one, was going to leave my children outside it again. In March of the following year, we officially inaugurated White Peaks with a private opening. I invited the same group of loyal family members who had accompanied me at the Oasis, plus several close partners and friends. The place was simply spectacular. Snow covered the roofs of the wooden cabins while the steam from the thermal pools rose toward the starry sky of Sierra Nevada. During the gala dinner, Uncle Ricardo stood up and raised his crystal glass. I want to say something about my niece Elena, he announced in a solemn voice, drawing everyone's attention. Just 2 years ago, some in this family thought she was lost, that she barely managed to survive. They were wrong. She wasn't lost. She was building. She was creating something grand and eternal, while the others settled for the usual appearances. I toast to Elena, who has shown us all that success is not begged for, it is built. Everyone raised their glasses and in that instant I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. A week after that inauguration, my phone rang again. It was Valeria. At first I hesitated to answer, but I slid my finger across the screen. This time her voice had no trace of that toxic arrogance from the wedding. She sounded exhausted, fragile, deeply defeated. Elena, can we talk? But really talk? She murmured. I'm listening. Valeria. There was a long silence broken only by a trembling sigh. I want to apologize. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at Lucia's wedding and you were right, absolutely right. I remained silent, letting her continue. I was envious, Elena, an envy that ate me inside. Envy of your talent, of your freedom, of the fact that you were building something that was genuinely yours. Matteo and I have a good standard of living, yes, but we're drowning in debt. We live trapped in a lie, pretending to be perfect so that Mom applauds us. I mocked you, belittled your work, and supported Mom in leaving you out of the vacations, because convincing others that you were a failure was the only way I had to feel superior. Hearing that confession was like watching a stone wall crumble that had been blocking the sun for 9 years. I'm so sorry for supporting Mom's cruelty. She continued with her voice breaking with tears. I'm sorry for pushing Diego and Sofia aside. I'm sorry for making you feel you didn't deserve respect. Do you think there's any possibility of starting over? I took a deep breath. Resentment is a poison you drink hoping the other person dies. And I no longer wanted any more poison in my life. I forgive you, Valeria. I replied in a serene and sincere voice. I accept your apologies, but we're not going back to the way things were before. We can build a new relationship based on respect, but my boundaries are now unbreakable. I'm no longer the little sister who lowers her head to keep the peace. I understand and I respect that very much, she said, sounding relieved. Then she hesitated for a second before asking, would it be okay if this summer I bring my children to visit the oasis? They want to see their cousins and see what their aunt has built. I sketched a small smile, feeling the weight of my own authority. Of course, Valeria. I would be delighted to receive you. Send me the dates that work for you and I'll tell reception to send you the rate with a small family discount. As clients, you will be very welcome. She caught the message instantly. There was no longer an open bar or privileges. Now they were on my turf. That seems perfect, Elena. Thank you, she replied with humility. Almost 2 years have passed since I bought that ruined resort. My architecture studio now has more than 20 employees and international projects. The Oasis and White Peaks operate with extremely high waiting lists and provide work for 80 people. Diego and Sofia are flourishing. They are confident, happy children who perfectly understand their own worth. My mother and I talk from time to time. It is a slow process, but at least now she treats me with the respect I earned through hard work. Valeria and her family spent 10 days at the Oasis last summer, paying their bill in full. There were no passive-aggressive comments, no reproaches, just two families sharing time on equal terms. They say that blood is thicker than water. But the original and complete quote reads like this. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose and cultivate are infinitely stronger than those you are born with by chance. Sometimes the perfect revenge has nothing to do with destroying others. Sometimes the perfect revenge is simply refusing to make yourself small, so that others can feel big. If your own family or life itself ever tells you that you are not enough, if they tell you there is no space for you in their lives, listen to me well. Don't cry, don't beg for a seat at anyone's table. Build your own table, build your own space, and then raise an empire. Because when you are the one who designs the plans, there will always, absolutely always, be plenty of room. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next story.